All right. Many thanks for joining us on the program. That's the BBC's Maryam Moshiri. Many thanks for joining us. I'm Rodo Diambo. See you tomorrow.
It's 6 p.m. in London. This is The World Today with Maryam Moshiri. Head to head, the Trump-Harris debate we've all been waiting for happens in just a few hours. We'll tell you everything you need to know. The Gaza Health Ministry says an Israeli strike on a humanitarian zone in Gaza has killed 19 people. Israel says it was targeting Hamas. Ukraine's largest attack on Moscow so far. Russian officials say they've shot down nearly 150 drones overnight in the latest wave of attacks. Also coming up on The World Today.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
Well, it's one giant leap for 4 private citizens who've blasted off into orbit in the hope of conducting the first private spacewalk. Hello, a very warm welcome to The World Today. The first US presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump takes place tonight. In a race still too close to call, the event is being seen as a critical moment for both candidates. It's taking place in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, a crucial swing state in the election this year. Well, we start our coverage with this report from our correspondent, Tom Bateman. Now, still to come on The World Today. Russian officials say they've shot down nearly 150 Ukrainian drones around the country overnight in the latest wave of attacks that have killed 1 woman. And out of this world, SpaceX launches 4 people into orbit to attempt the world's first private spacewalk. We'll have the very latest around the world and up in space. This is BBC World News Today. Hello, you're watching The World Today with me, Maryam Moshiri. Russia and Ukraine launched more attacks against each other overnight, and Russian officials say that Ukraine struck Moscow and Western Russia in one of its biggest ever drone attacks, killing at least 1 woman and wrecking dozens of homes and forcing the major closure of airports in the capital. Well, flight radar tracker showed an empty Moscow sky, almost empty earlier today, as you can see here. As a result of the attack, 4 airports servicing Moscow, including major hubs, had cancelled or delayed flights, according to state media. SpaceX has launched 4 private astronauts into space on board a Falcon 9 rocket. The Polaris Dawn mission aims to use new spacesuits to attempt the first commercial spacewalk. Well, the mission is being bankrolled by the billionaire Jared Isaacman, who is mission commander. He's joined by Scott Petit, a retired US Air Force pilot, and SpaceX employees Sarah Gillis and Anna Menon. Good luck to those on that space mission. They'll be doing a spacewalk at some point, and we, of course, as always, will be covering it here on the BBC. Do stay with us, though, here on BBC News. I'm back after this short break. This is BBC News, and these are the latest headlines. Head to head, the Trump-Harris debate we've all been waiting for happens in just a few hours, and we'll tell you everything you need to know.
I'm Sumi Somaskanda, live in Philadelphia, where the campaign teams are making their final preparations before the candidates take the stage tonight.
Also coming up, Australia plans to ban children from social media. The Prime Minister says young people should get off their devices and onto the footy fields. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will go head-to-head tonight in a 90-minute television debate. There are just 8 weeks left until voters go to the polls, and both candidates are hoping to impress, particularly in the key swing states like, for example, Pennsylvania, where the debate is taking place. We'll be live in Philadelphia in a moment, but first, here's our analysis editor, Ros Atkins, looking at the latest polling data. Still to come on The World Today. May the Force be with you. George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, leads tribute to the Darth Vader voice actor James Earl Jones, who's died at the age of 93. And why was Beyoncé left out of the Country Music Awards despite having one of the biggest country hits of the year? That's a question we'll be asking. Around the world and across the UK, this is The World Today with Maryam Moshiri. The number of people killed after Typhoon Yagi swept through northern Vietnam has climbed to 127. That's according to the Disaster Management Agency. The authorities estimate that more than 50 people are still missing. The number of injured has surpassed 700. The storm has left large areas under floodwaters and forced thousands of people to leave their homes. Storm Yagi made a landfall in Vietnam on Saturday, bringing with it torrential rains and causing the worst flooding the country has seen in decades. The Australian government says it plans to ban children from using social media. The legislation will impose and enforce a minimum age to use platforms such as Facebook and Instagram by the end of the year. Although the exact age hasn't been revealed, the government's consulting on setting it between 14 and 16. Here's the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, explaining his reasons for changing. Now, some news from the break dancing industry. Remember the Australian breaker Ray Gunn, who came to fame in the Paris Olympics after being eliminated without winning a single battle at the Games? Guess what? She's risen to #1 in world rankings. You don't believe me? I promise you. Here's the proof from the World Dance Sport Federation website. It says it calculates the rankings based on each athlete's top 4 performances over the last year. So basically, Ray Gunn's performances failed to score points in any of her Olympic contests. She lost all of them, but she said that perhaps the judges didn't appreciate her moves, which included the sprinkler and the kangaroo-inspired hopping. In her defence, she also pointed out she's been ranked B girl in Australia for 3 of the last 5 years. Incredible, right? You can read up on it online if you don't believe me. Honestly, it's true. You've been watching The World Today with Maryam Moshiri. Stay with us on the BBC.
And that's really the nub of this. The hard part comes next.
That gift of panda diplomacy.
But this is the first time we've done this in modern history.
And we're going to say unprecedented a lot.
The news is just words without the context.
And this is the context.
The Context with Christian Fraser on BBC News.
It's 7 p.m. in London. This is The World Today with Maryam Moshiri. Hundreds of prisoners across England and Wales walk free early in an effort to ease overcrowding in prisons. The UK government wins the vote on the plan to cut winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. Head to head, the Trump-Harris debate will begin in a few hours' time. We'll tell you everything you need to know. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres strongly condemns a deadly airstrike by Israel in a designated safe zone in southern Gaza. Also coming up on The World Today.
3, 2, 1, ignition, and
It's one giant leap for 4 private citizens who blasted off into orbit in the hope of conducting the first commercial spacewalk. Hello and a very warm welcome to The World Today with Maryam Moshiri. The first of thousands of prisoners in England and Wales have been allowed out of jail early today. It's all part of a new government scheme to try to ease prison overcrowding. More than 1,700 have been released today in the first wave, with more than 5,000 to be let out early over the next 2 months. Now, those released today had been sentenced to up to 5 years in prison. They've served 40% of their time rather than the usual 50%. Still to come on The World Today. The stage awaits. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump prepare to go head-to-head in their first TV debate. We'll be live in the Spin Room in Philadelphia. Around the world and across the UK, this is The World Today on BBC News. Now, there are just 2 months to go before the US presidential election, and tonight, for the first time, Donald Trump will face his rival Kamala Harris in a head-to-head debate. What happens in just a few hours' time could prove pivotal in that battle for the White House. Well, the race between the former US president and the current Democratic vice president is a close one that could swing either way. Well, let's cross live now and speak to Richard Goodstein, Democratic strategist and former advisor. And Richard, you've had experience, haven't you, before these debates, coaching, giving advice. Tell us a little bit about your experience. You will indeed, Sumi. Thank you very much indeed. And here on BBC News, you will be able to watch rolling coverage of the ABC News presidential debate simulcast. News coverage will start from 8 p.m. East Coast time on Tuesday and 1 a.m. if you're in the UK or running on BST. The actual debate will start an hour later. It's going to be very interesting indeed, isn't it? SpaceX has launched 4 private astronauts into space on board a Falcon 9 rocket. The Polaris Dawn mission aims to use new spacesuits to attempt the first commercial spacewalk. Well, the mission is being bankrolled by the billionaire Jared Isaacman, who is mission commander. He's joined by Scott Poteet, a retired US Air Force pilot, and SpaceX employees Sarah Gillis and Anna Menon, when astrobiologist Keith Cowing talked to me about the launch. Interesting science indeed. You're watching The World Today.
Hello there. The weather across large parts of Europe is turning. We had a cold front move southwards through the day on Tuesday.
The story of the US election on BBC News. What of? The world is fast moving and can be confusing.
So let's talk about it.
5 Live Breakfast with Rachel and Rick. Listen on BBC Sounds.
This is BBC News, the latest headlines. Head-to-head, the Trump-Harris debate will begin in just a few hours' time. We're going to tell you everything you need to know. The UK government wins the vote on the plan to cut winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. A coroner has ruled Jeremy Kyle's TV show was not a contributory factor in the death of one of its guests, 63-year-old Steve Diamond. More on that in a moment. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. They're going to be going head-to-head tonight in a 90-minute television debate. There are just 8 weeks left, believe it or not, until voters go to the polls in the US. And both candidates are both hoping to impress, particularly in the key swing states like Pennsylvania, where the debate is taking place. We can cross live now to my colleague, chief presenter Sumi Somaskanda, who is in Philadelphia. And Sumi, what can we expect from tonight's 90-minute debate between these two? A very quick update for you before we move on, and that is that in the last few minutes, the spokesperson for the White House, Matthew Miller, has said that the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London. They underscored the fundamental importance of the special relationship. They discussed the importance of enduring support for Ukraine and sustained efforts in countering the Kremlin. Also, the need to finalise a ceasefire deal in Gaza. That is the latest breaking news for you coming from that meeting earlier on. Well, still to come here on BBC News, we're going to be looking at that movie. Yes, it is the Emily Maitlis book that has been made into a movie about that infamous Prince Andrew interview. We'll have the very latest on that for you here on The World Today.
που μου άρεσε ήταν τα μαθηματικά. Όχι πραξιστά, αλλά έτσι να κάνεις σχήματα και αυτά μου άρεσε.
Almost every facade in the village of Pirgi is covered in these geometric patterns. Located on the island of Chios, it is a hypnotizing landscape made of triangles, rhombuses, and semicircles. Craftsmen employ a technique called xista, the Greek word for scratch.
Δεν μπορείς να έχεις σε ένα σχέδιο να είναι άσπρο και να ακολουθήσει μετά πάλι άσπρο. Θα πρέπει να βρεις ένα σχέδιο που θα ταιριάζει να κάνει την αντίθεση. Ο χάρακας στο αλφάδι, από τα πιο βασικά, ο διαβήτης, το πυρούνι και το κυβελώνα.
Original global stories from the BBC.
More now on one of our main stories this hour, that parliamentary vote which gave the go-ahead to the government's plans for means testing the winter fuel payments for pensioners. The policy was not in Labour's election manifesto, although the party did say it would have to look at public spending if it took power. It's led to a debate on what the impact of the change will be on poorer pensioners. Here's Ben Chu from BBC Verify.
Dogs will be everywhere, but Moody has never been in the Newsnight studio.
Noor Nanji, BBC News.
The King and Queen will head to Australia and Samoa in October in what will be Charles's first royal tour since being diagnosed with cancer earlier this year. Love that horn at the end. Right, that's it from me. Christian is here with the context coming up. But now, a quick look at the weather with Chris.
Expose how people are targeted, because I'm a reporter who can do that.
Behind the stories. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser, and this is The Context.
The stage is set, the lights are being fine-tuned. A very important aspect of the debate tonight is not just the substance and the policy that will be discussed, but also the tenor and the tone.
Well, I used to be a Democrat, not anymore. I switched to Republican, but I don't really go by that. I go by who says what's better.
10% or so undecideds. They're the people alongside the 50 million others who will tune in tonight who will be watching this debate to decide and make up their mind on which of these candidates they're going to pick.
Yes, the US election is on a knife edge. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump tied in many of the crucial swing states. Tonight they are in arguably the most important of them all, Philadelphia. We will get analysis from Sumi shortly, and in an hour's time our expert panel will be here to give you their thoughts on what is at stake.